You need a vacation, so why not come play in LA? Fill your days with fun and let Los Angeles dazzle you with iconic landmarks, epic scenery, and stunning coastlines. And when the sun goes down, it's the perfect place to enjoy world-class dining and nightlife. Let play lead the way and soak up all this city has to offer. Start planning your LA getaway now at visitcalifornia.com.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
At the Musial with Allen and Daniel, we'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. With me this week, our final guest of this run of half a year, or it feels like half a year, I guess 5 months. We saved the best for last. It's our friend Alex Crisafulli. Alex, it has been a while since we've talked, but it's always good to have you on.
It's always great to be on. Very nice to talk to you again. Although I will say, because you just mentioned I am the last guest until Allen returns, I believe someone a couple weeks ago, your guest, or it was you, but I think it was your guest, said clearly you started off with a good guest and you're just, basically saving the worst for last. It's a sliding scale from good to bad. And then I couldn't help but notice, I think it was Richard McGill maybe who said that.
Yeah, Richard said that a couple weeks ago, yeah.
Then I couldn't help but notice last week you said, and Alex will be our last guest. So please tune in next week.
Yeah, I don't think it might that way at all. I think that every guest we've had on has been a lot of fun to talk to. We get the media types out of the way early because they get kind of busy during the season, but everybody's an excellent guest on here because that means people aren't listening to me for 30 minutes to an hour, and that's always the benefit to the listeners.
Well, I honestly, though, it is great to be on here, not just because I get to talk to you, but also because this has been a very fun month of Cardinals baseball.
Yeah, I don't, when we were planning this out, before the season started, even we were, I scheduled way in advance. And I don't expect we thought we would have a lot of fun things to talk about at this time. We were probably thought we would be talking about the trade deadline and how can we get, the maximum value for these free agents and stuff like that. But instead, especially this month, The Cardinals have played good teams and beaten them. They've played bad teams and done what you're supposed to do, beaten them as well. Um, it's been such a reversal from the last 2 years that I don't know that anybody in the fan base is quite knows what to make out of it.
Yes, and I would say it's been a very long time, unless my memory is just betraying me, which is certainly possible at this age, as you know. Um, it's been a very long time since we were not expecting good things, and the team surprised us in a good way.
Mhm.
2004, and I hesitate to bring up 2004 because even going into that season, we knew that was one a team that was stacked with talent, and they were coming off. Even though 2003 was not a playoff year, the 3 years prior to that were, and they were coming off some very good teams. In 2003, down year, but still a pretty solid year nonetheless. And we were very well aware of the talent on that squad. That said, I don't know if it was the hangover of the disappointing 2003. I don't know if we were worried about pitching. I think thinking back to that time, I was. And then they got off to like a 23-22 start, or 22 and
Mhm.
21. I forget whatever that famous number is. And then they just went on that tear over the summer. Again, there's the similarities between this team and 2004 probably in there. Uh, but, but for some reason that comes to mind. I'm just like,
Yeah.
gosh, this is quite pleasant.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I can't think of any other time, so you're probably right. Maybe 2012 because you kinda thought there'd be an hangover, but, it was still a good team that just won the World Series, so, yeah, I don't think that would count either.
In 2012, if I recall, they started off pretty hot, and then they were kind of up and down the rest of the year. Ended up winning 88 games, and then came within a collapse of making the World Series again,
Mhm.
uh, possibly winning the World Series again. I feel very good about us against that Tigers team. Of course, who knows what happens, but I still think about that dang game five against the Giants, probably more than I should. But, when I think about this team right now, and I think one of the most overused words when we talk about baseball teams is like, oh, they're fun. They are a lot of fun. Have you seen this player? He's fun. I really like that new prospect. He's a lot of fun. He when he gets on base, he does a dance, and he's the lead singer of a ska band in the off season. Like, oh, well, is he any good? Well, no, not really, but he's fun. Like, I'm too old for that.
Mhm.
Like, I know all I care about is basically like, are they winning? Are they losing? What is happening? All that said, this team really is enjoyable to watch in a way that feel like has been missing from the Cardinals. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, one, they put the ball in play a lot, as
Mhm.
you know. They don't strike out a lot, and they also don't walk a lot. But they also allow their opponent to put the ball in play a lot. They don't have a lot of pitchers with, who are blowing it by you, who have a lot of, just stuff that the batters are missing. So when you watch a 2025 Cardinals game, you're watching a lot of balls in play, at least in terms of this era. When you come, if we're
Mhm.
talking about this era, you see a lot of balls in play when you watch this Cardinals team. And that is enjoyable to watch because they have a good defense, and often they're doing very good things when they're putting the ball in play. They're not hitting a lot of home runs, but they're still, I believe, in the top 10 in the league in slugging because they're still hitting for a lot of extra bases and getting on base a lot. And it's just been very enjoyable to watch because it also seems somewhat sustainable.
Yeah, you're right. I think all of that plays into this. The winning obviously helps a lot too, because I think if this team was exactly the same in the way it was, but was, at 500 or maybe a slightly bit, we would still say, that's fun. But I don't think we'd have the excitement that we would about it, even if it was, just because I think that overachievement, as we're seeing now, is a large part of it. But this is a fun team. It is a team that's got, some interesting personalities, but they are also people that are good too. Like you said, they're not just defined by Victor Scott's rap career. It's Victor Scott's been a very good player this year, that kind of thing. So, yeah,
I was not talking about Victor
I
Scott.
know.
Let the record show, because he actually is good. I'm talking
Exactly.
about when it's some guy who is not that good, but has personality spilling out of his shorts, which, hey, that's great. But, if you get that OPS up a little bit, that'd be even better.
By the way, the Cardinals are 7th in OPS as a team. So, yeah,
Okay.
still doing pretty well. Yeah, and I think that's just something that, I mean, there's so many differences in this team and even last year's team, but especially in 2023, because not only are the players approaching the game differently, because we're not seeing the passivity that we saw those 2 years, but it has definitely thrown a switch from the Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado led teams, which were, you know, and I can say this, the accountants of baseball, that just they went to the park and they punched the clock and they did their thing and then they left. It has turned into the Youngry Birds as we getting more and more play, and it's amazing to see the culture shift that quickly when there are still a lot of pieces that were here for that.
Yes, and I think that is the biggest argument against what I said earlier during my rant about like fun, because those guys were decidedly not very fun when they were the quote unquote leaders of the team,
Mhm.
which is not to say they weren't great Cardinals in their own right, especially certainly some huge flashes from both of them, an MVP season from Goldschmidt. So to go against what I was just saying 5 minutes ago, it is kind of nice seeing, Newt Bar flapping the wings and whatnot, uh, as compared to what we've had the last couple of years with just kind of these stoic guys out there, just as you said, punching the clock. And I don't mean to say that as if they were mailing it in, but you know what
Right,
I mean.
right. Yeah, I mean they were doing their job and they were doing it well for a lot of that time period. Um,
It's just how they are.
right. That's
Yeah.
them.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, and we've seen. I mean, I think even with Arnaudo still here, he's loosened up a little bit. It's still not, he's still not leading the charm charge, if you will. But he has loosened up a little bit, and he has done a better job. I would say he would probably testify to that of dealing with the younger players and letting them take the lead, letting them be who they are, and not trying to clamp down on that or anything. Because that was the arguments last winter, right? That Goldie and Arenado needed the veteran leadership to come in and put these kids in their place. And I think that's probably a little bit overstated, but it was still that was that kind of that idea was out there. And this year, it's like, hey, these are the guys that are gonna be leading this team, and we're gonna let them do it. And so far, they've taken the reins on that.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's been a nice sort of changing of the guard in that respect. And I I think one interesting thing about this team, and I thought about this today because I was listening to the off day guys, because today, as we're
Mhm.
recording this, is the off day. And one of them brought up just like the consistency. And I was kind of surprised to see. Well, I wasn't surprised to see actually. It actually kind of reaffirmed what I thought. But I was looking at Fangraphs leaderboards today, and 7 Cardinals right now are on pace to qualify for a batting title, which means they're going to have at least 502 plate appearances.
Mhm.
That there's a very good chance that won't happen. I think we have obviously not gotten into the grind of the season yet. Um, but they've had a lot of the same faces in the lineup day in and day out. And 6 of those guys are having either a good offensive year or at least a solid offensive year. The one exception would be Jordan Walker, who I think, as we've seen, has at least the last week or two has looked a lot better. I don't remember if it was the game against, gosh, I think it was the first game against Baltimore. And I was listening to it on the radio, but I saw the highlights the next morning. It was late in the game when he just kind of muscled the ball to right center off the wall. Did you see that?
I think so. Yeah, I can't remember. I remember seeing a play like that. Yeah, that may have been. Was that the second game? The one that is that the triple that he hit, or is that?
Yes, I
Yeah,
believe that
yeah.
was
So
the trip. So
the
yeah,
second game.
that would have been the
Yeah, because he
second
had
game.
smashed that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
and that was on the heels of I think against the Diamondbacks, one of those games, he hit a ball that was like close to 118 miles per hour or something
Mm-hmm,
like that off the
mm-hmm.
bat, something crazy. And you just feel like if he could unlock that and somehow figure it out, sounds very too simple, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Uh, it just seems like there is still way too much potential there to think like, oh, this is not a guy we should count on. This is not a guy we should count on fulfilling what we thought he might be. Because when you see flashes of him do something like that, it just seems so, gosh, it just seems hard to believe that there's not something there that can be unlocked. And again, he of those 7 guys, he's the only one really having if you go by WRC plus, that's well below league average, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of his all around offensive value. Everyone else is, either right around league average, right above league average, or if you're Brendon Donovan having one of the better offensive seasons in the National League. And from a pitching standpoint, I was looking at it today, and all 5 starting pitchers right now are on pace to throw at least 150 innings. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, gosh, I looked at it earlier and I already forgot. But believe me, and I'm sure this won't surprise you, that their starters have thrown a lot more innings than a majority of teams in baseball.
Yeah.
And I think what that tells me is that they are constantly in games because they have pitchers who are going, somewhat deep, at least by 2025 standards, and they have an offense that can put runs on the board. So even if you have a game like last night where Miles Michaelis is getting beat up early, I still feel very good, especially when they're playing a team like the Orioles, that this game is not lost. And I don't know if I would have necessarily felt that last year or the year before. In fact, I know I would not have. And
Right.
and I think that's where we could get a little worried because that's just not going to it's probably not going to stay like that. There's going to be an injury to the pitching staff, or some guys are going to start getting knocked around more than they
Mm-hmm.
have so far this year. And then when you look at the offensive guys, after Contreras and Arenado, I think Donovan's the oldest player on this team. It's a pretty,
Yeah.
in terms of the regulars, it's a pretty young group, and that's good. But it's also one of those things where, well, let's see if they wilt when we start to get to the dog days of baseball. So there is obviously, as you know, a lot of reasons to be very cautious with this team going forward. But I think, and as others have said on plenty of podcasts I've listened to this week, that what we're seeing, our eyes are not lying to us. Like the numbers on the periphery say this team is very good, and when you watch them or listen to them, as I've been doing a lot lately, they are very good.
Yeah, I think that's you know, even though they have played a number of close games, although not as many as maybe they could have, because they've been able to stretch some games out late with this offense. It is, yeah, it's totally different than it was last year. At when they were, this time last year they were in that run that started on Mother's Day, and they were the best team in baseball for what, a month and a half or something like that, but they never had a positive run differential, and it never all this other stuff that just made you say, okay, this isn't going to last, this isn't going to be sustainable. But like you said, all that stuff is there this year, and I think for me, I'm still trying to shake the last couple of years. It's definitely to the point, like you said, if they give up 3 runs in the first, I'm like, but I do think that they can come back. Whereas, the last couple of years, you probably just turn it off. You don't even bother turning it on if you haven't turned it on yet. But I think I'm not quite fully invested mentally in this idea that they can always come back. I keep waiting for that other shoe to drop, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, and I think that's very understandable. I think the reason why I feel differently about this version of the Cardinals than maybe the past couple of years is early on, it looked like what was really kind of this team's Achilles heel was the bullpen.
Mm.
And uh, that's been fixed. I hesitate to say it's been fixed, but it's certainly improved, obviously, during this sort of streak they've been on since early May. But even when the bullpen was bad, I thought, look, the starting pitching has been better than we thought it was going to be. The offense looks like they're going to be exactly what we'd want from this group of guys, which is, we know we don't have like an Aaron Judge type player, but we do have guys who have shown the ability to do exactly what they're doing, whether that's Lars Nootbaar getting on base a lot, or at least he was, in April. He's had a good couple of games the last couple of days, but May has not been as strong. But we thought this offense could do what they're doing. Maybe not to the extent that they are, but it didn't seem beyond the realm of possibility. The problem was the bullpen, but when the problem's the bullpen that early in the season, my thing is that's always the easiest thing to fix. It's very hard if you have just awful starters to just somehow, shuffle a guy here and there, and all of a sudden your starting pitching looks transformed, or with a offense that just is not giving you much. But bullpen has always been, quite different. And maybe I'm just completely brainwashed because of the Colby Rasmus trade that but led to some of the greatest moments of our lives, basically. But so I was always a little optimistic about this team, even when they weren't doing so well record wise.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's pretty interesting that the bullpen has been. And you're right. You hate to start to say bullpen has been fixed or anything like that, but you know we have seen Jojo Romero, who was pitching really badly, and then the Cardinals were able to come up with a tweak, and he's back on track. And I don't know that we've seen that over the last few years, right? It was like if a guy went bad, he went bad, right? Giovanni Gallegos or something like that. There was no fixing him. And maybe that's what happened. Ryan Fernandez, they may have tried and it didn't work, and it's not necessarily worked at Memphis either. But to see somebody like Romero, or even Roycroft went down and came back up with much more effectiveness, it feels like maybe that the staff has had the influx, that new blood that has come in, has figured out ways to improve these guys more than the staff did beforehand.
Yeah. Brant Brown, I'm a huge fan. I was a big fan even before he joined the Cardinals, because he dropped that ball when he was a Cub,
right.
And
that's always a good thing.
Yeah, that cost him. Was that 98? When was that?
I think it was 98. So I think they were able to bounce back from it. But
okay, I thought it cost him something even more. Than maybe I'm wrong, but whatever the case, great work by him in doing that. But I'm not going to pretend I know anything about the hitting coaches beyond the results, but how often we scream, you have to fire this guy when the results aren't there. So I think it's only fair to give a lot of praise when the results are, especially when it's a new guy coming in for the old guy who wasn't getting the results we wanted. So big Brant Brown fan so far this year. Talking about the bullpen and talking about, you said, they haven't had as many like 1-run games because they've been able to add some insurance runs lately. One thing I've learned about Helsley, even when he comes in for that 3-run lead save, that tying run is coming into play.
Yeah.
we're probably going to win, but make no mistake, that tying run is going to make an appearance in the batter's box. He, I hesitate to say it's a problem, but it's not great. He certainly is walking too many batters and allowing too many hits. Closers always make you nervous. It's just the nature of the position, and they're in the game because it's a close game, and the minute they allow a runner, everyone gets nervous. So it's a tough job. It's a tough gig. I get it, but it seems like you remember Lee. Of course you remember Lee Smith, but my memory might be betraying me, but that year he set the National League saves record. I feel like it was all 1, 2, 3 innings. I felt like he just came in and slammed the door. And so I would like to see a few more Lee Smith type outings from Helsley.
Yeah, I don't quite, because I wasn't able to watch the games as much then because the reach wasn't as much down here in the early 90s.
Believe me, that same year, I probably watched one game a week back then.
But I don't remember it being an issue. And it feels like most of the Cardinals closers since then, except for maybe Tom Hinkie because he only was here for 1 year, have gone through this cycle where they will have a dominant year, like Helsley had last year, like Isringhausen probably did his first year, but then it's going to become let's walk the tightrope, right? And let's see how many runners we can get on while still locking down a save. And it feels like that's where we're at. And then unfortunately it slides into, well, we don't always get the save, and the shelf life of a closer is ridiculously small, which is another reason we talked about the Cardinals trading Helsley in this past winter. But yeah,
well, I think Alex Ray, not to interrupt, but I think what you just described, Alex Ray has jammed all of that into 1 year.
This is true. He did. Yeah. And unfortunately, Mike Schilt didn't recognize it. But so, yeah, I think that, we knew that Helsley was going to step back because last year was just so dominant. But I think we thought, I was talking with somebody. I wrote in my Substack this week that he's had 4 perfect outings. He's actually only had 3 because one of those outings he had a double play. So that's 3 out of, I think, 19 now times that he's come out that he hasn't allowed a base runner. And you're right. I mean, he's not allowing runs too many times, or if he is, it's not the tying or winning run. But that's still not exactly what we would like to see. Especially in these games where you've had like Miles Michaelis go out there and give you 6 scoreless innings, it's like you cannot give up this kind of game. But yet occasionally we feel like it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people have this relationship with their closer, but you don't have to look much further than his walk rate to know that he's definitely putting way too many guys on base. And eventually that's going to bite him. I think it's only really bitten him once so far this year that I recall. But it just is not something that is all that sustainable.
So, and that really gets you that diciness, because I think there's an argument to be made that the Cardinals could trade Ryan Helsley at the trade deadline and not be selling, right? I mean, that they could still be competing. They could still be trying to do stuff. I don't know if that works psychologically, but I do think that, on the paper, you could do that. But it doesn't feel like that's what the Cardinals are going to do, right? I mean, there's just no way that they give up on any kind of chance like that if the team is still in contention.
I wouldn't think so, and I trust Bernie Miklasz on this stuff because he, it's Bernie. He's pretty plugged into the team, has a lot of sources, and he has been stressing that is 100% not a move Mozeliak would make, even if everything is pointing in the direction of it being the right move. And I'm not saying everything is pointing in that direction. he's still one of our few, even guys in the bullpen with a lot of swing and miss stuff. So I still think he's very valuable to have on the team. So yes, I agree with you. If Bernie is saying that over and over, then I would certainly think that's the case. That it would take this team kind of collapsing once we hit summer, like they did last year, for them to want to move on from him at the deadline.
Yeah, I do wonder how different it would be if this was not the last year of Musial, but the first year of Hein Bloom.
Meaning because Mosaic he doesn't want to go out as a seller.
Partly that, partly because he has a lot invested in the whole team and everything, whereas Bloom in his first year is like, I'm going to be here for a while. It feels like it, at least. I can make that gamble. I can push that. And I've got a little bit of honeymoon, if you will. I don't know. I don't know that it would make any difference, but I could see that he would be like, hey, this is the new way we're going to do things. Whereas Mo's like, that's so anti-Mo that he just can't even fathom it.
Yeah, it's tough to say because we haven't had a lot of seasons like this to compare it to, in terms of the Cardinals potentially being sellers at the deadline. I guess the last 2 years, at least in the Mo era, the last 2 years are really the only ones that come to mind. And they, for their part, they did get rid of a lot of, Jordan Montgomery, a lot of more. Yeah. Flaherty, some other people are slipping my mind right now. But I agree with you. It does not feel like something that would happen. And if they are within striking distance of the Cubs, and I want to talk about that in a second, it doesn't feel like something that should happen. One interesting thing about this year, at the beginning, if I was trying to squint and see a playoff team, and believe me, this was like before we even had the numbers to suggest, like, I think last thing I saw today, Fangraphs had them at like 45% chance to make the playoffs. Okay. So I'm talking like, back in April, if I had to squint and see a playoff team, it was like, okay, you probably better win the division, because the wild card is just going to be very competitive this year. The Phillies hadn't started going yet, but you knew they would. The Giants and Padres got off to a pretty hot start. And of course, you have the Dodgers, who are always there. So it just seemed like it was going to be super crowded in the wild card hunt. And as always, it's the NL Central. I've always said it's illegal for more than two teams in the NL Central to have their act together at once. So you just have to outslug that other team if you have.
2015 was a rare exception.
Yes, yeah, it was. I think there was a few when the Astros were there, but that's when we had 6 teams. So when the Astros were there were a few times where it was like us, the Cubs, and the Astros kind of slugging it out. But yeah, 2015 really is the exception. So I thought, like, hey, look, like, if you want to make the playoffs, you're just going to have to somehow find a way to win 88, 89 games and win this division. But now it looks like the Cubs are better than I thought they were. They look like they're real. And it looks like the Cardinals, after watching them play the Phillies and the Mets and the Tigers and the Diamondbacks, all very quality teams, and they certainly held their own in those series. They lost to the Tigers, but they certainly could have won 2 of those 3 games. They could have won that second game. I believe it was the second game I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's screwable.
So now I'm more like, well, okay, you might not catch the Cubs, although it's not, a lot of baseball to play. And we haven't even played them yet, which is, disgraceful in my opinion. But now I'm thinking, if this team wants to make the playoffs, they need to win the wild card, to the point that I was watching highlights this morning on my MLB app on my television as I was making breakfast, and the Tigers were like playing, I don't know, the Brewers or some National League team, and I'm already like, all right, go Tigers, because this matters to the Cardinals. I'm like, all right, it might be a little early to be scoreboard watching like this, but point remains. I think actually, I now think the wild card is the route this team might have to go through to make the playoffs.
I think it's fair to say that. I do think, and somebody pointed this out on Twitter today. I saw it. The Cubs are 12-13 against teams over 500, while the Cardinals are 16-12. I mean, the Cubs have played some tough teams, but not to the extent that, they started off the year with the Dodgers and all that kind of stuff, but they've had a little bit nicer run as of late.
Yeah, 23 of their 35 wins are against teams below 500, which, is not a perfect way to measure a team. But they have been playing some lousy teams lately, like whether it's the White Sox, the Rockies. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do with those teams. That's what the Cardinals have had trouble with over the last couple of years, is beating those teams that they're supposed to beat. I mean, the one, the White Sox, set the record for losses last year, and the one series they won was against the Cardinals. So they, I'm not discounting what the Cubs have done, but like you said, they haven't played them. They're still 13 games for these two teams to meet this year, or 12 or 13. So I think I am surprised how, as we talk right now, the Cardinals are tied with the Padres for the second wild card, basically. So they're in the wild card if the playoffs ended today. And I'm like you, I didn't expect that to even be even as good as even if they played well. I just expected those West teams to kind of, jumble that up, and they'd be 2 or 3 or 5 games out of the wild card, even though as well as they played. So to me right now, it feels like they currently have 2 options to get in, and that's honestly somewhat, maybe even 2 more than we thought at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, you might be right. I think the Cubs scare me more than I want them to, just with how badly they've been beating teams. I could be wrong, but I think they have the best run differential in the National League. That said, Steele went down a couple weeks ago, and so their pitching as the season goes on could end up being an issue for them. But they have, a lot of their young guys are playing very well on the offensive side of the ball, and they do look like a very good team to me. But I would obviously be very happy to be wrong.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. And they do have the best in the National League and just second to the Yankees in run differential.
Okay. But, speaking of, we still have to play the Cubs 13 times, and, that used to be 19. And you would think in the days when that was 19, we certainly would have played them by now. And it was nice because it wasn't just like, well, yeah, if you play them a bunch early, then you might not play them over the summer because you want to play them late. And like when you played them 19 times, you could count on just like the whole season being peppered with Cubs Cardinals series throughout, which I always really enjoyed. It's probably my favorite rivalry in sports. And the reason why I bring this up is watching that Cardinals Orioles series, listening to it and then watching the highlights the next morning. Baltimore is just up the road from here in DC, and the weather yesterday was just awful. So I knew it was awful in Baltimore as well. But I'm thinking like, gosh, they probably feel like they have to play this game no matter what, because otherwise they have to figure out a time during this season for the Cardinals to travel back to Baltimore. And who knows when that's going to be an easy thing to do. And I just wonder if that is more of an issue now with this balanced schedule where they play every team. But with the American League teams, they only play them once. And if they play them on the road, if there's this added pressure of we got to get these games in, because if we don't, then we're really kind of in a scheduling bind trying to make these games up.
I think it's probably now. In this case, it worked out because both teams would have had the game. They would have played today, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted their off
Yeah.
day, and that's understandable. But yeah, I think there is some of that. I think that's why we've seen. Um, you also see them, making up those games so early, like a doubleheader, like the next day or something like
Uh-huh.
that. Instead of so often, it would be like, oh, we'll do it in September 19th or whatever like that. But
Right.
then they're like, well, if it happens, if it gets to rain out in September, then they can't fix it, so they have to do it now. I think that I'm pretty sure that the schedule has lent itself to that. It becomes a little bit more dicey about how they do it, and it's also probably led to some games getting called early, like in the middle of a series, so they can do a doubleheader the next day instead of waiting around and then all of a sudden it's midnight and they need to cancel a game, and then how do you do that the next day? Um, but yeah, I mean the balance schedule, and you bring up the balance schedule, you get me on my old man box, but I
Why
haven't
do you think
liked.
I brought it up?
I figured. I have not liked the balance schedule since it was submitted. Or proposed. I get this idea that everybody gets to see everybody, but my goodness, and I guess maybe part of it's bias. I don't get to but like one game a year, so it doesn't really matter to me who's
Yeah.
coming to St. Louis because I'm seeing them on TV anyway. But you can see everybody on TV, right? I mean, it's not impossible. It's not like in the 40s when you couldn't see that American League, you couldn't see Joe DiMaggio if you were living in St. Louis because it didn't, until the World Series, because it just wasn't possible. All you could hear about him because he didn't come through town, unless he was playing the Browns. And, you just didn't have that
Sure.
opportunity. People are covered now. I mean, you can watch every single at bat of anybody you want. And even if you don't have to pay for MLB TV, you can watch it the next day on MLB.com, with, and check out the bats and stuff. So I feel like that's less of a draw than it should be. And I liked the rivalries. I liked the fact that they played everybody in the division all the time. You got to really know who were the Pirates, who were the Reds, who were the Cubs. And if you played that, if you won the National League Central, you kind of felt like you deserved it because you had played all those people so that many times. So I don't imagine they'll ever go back to it, but yeah, this idea, and we've seen it over the last couple of years. Like I think last year the Cardinals Cubs were done at the very beginning of August, and that's just not right, right? But then now you've got it where they haven't. I don't remember, they play sometime next month, right? But it'll be after Memorial Day before you see the Cubs, and that doesn't feel right either. So I don't know.
They played the end of June.
Yeah.
That's their first series. Obviously, I could not agree more. I remember when the Astros moved to the American League, and all of a
Hmm.
sudden you had an odd number of team in both leagues, which meant
Yep.
an interleague series every day,
Yep.
and that felt like a shock to the senses. That kind of to me was like the beginning of the end of kind of the separation of the two leagues.
Hmm.
Um, because before then, interleague still sort of felt like this niche fun thing. That they had already graduated to like basically you play another division in the other league, which was different from how it started, where it was just like you play like one or two teams or whatever. So it was already a somewhat regular thing, but it was still kind of like I don't know. It still seemed something more like, oh, we have an interleague series,
Hmm.
coming up, and now it's just like, oh, Blue Jays, and then we're playing the Mariners. Okay, it's just
Yeah.
like it just seems like, and believe me, I'm just being a grouch. They're not. This is not something worth complaining about because it's not going to be rolled back. Um,
Mm.
but I could not agree more. And I especially would think from the player standpoint, the travel, I would think they like the old schedule better, especially, the Cardinals probably uh, have it better than most teams given where they're located. But if you're the Mariners,
Yeah.
and you have to, I mean, basically every team in your division is somewhat far away, but let alone all the other teams. And you have to travel even that much more. Gosh, I think that would start start to kind of wear me down a little bit.
Yeah, I would
I'm
think
also
so.
a
I
guy who
do.
doesn't like flying more than an hour and a half. So let me hear.
That's fair. That's fair. I do wonder, and you said it won't roll back, and I understand, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but I do wonder how things will look if and when, and it's still probably a ways off, but they add 2 more teams. And because in theory, they put
Mm-hmm.
one in the National League, one in the American League teams. All of a sudden, you have 16 teams. Maybe you go to 4 divisions.
Yeah.
But at that point, does it become too unwieldy to play everybody? Do you? I mean, I don't know. I mean, and you're right. There's I have had this nagging feeling ever since, they did interleague play. They got rid of the league offices, then the DHs and everything. Um, I have this feeling that at some point in time, there's not going to be an American League and a National League. That there or not the way we know it, and
Yeah.
they're just going to kind of throw them all in there. And top 8 teams from each of this groups get to go or something like that. And I hate that because, I'm an old grump, but it loses a lot of the history that the teams have had. I feel like it's a little harder to compare this era to past eras anyway. But yeah, I feel like that's probably coming, and an expansion probably accelerates it.
Here's a dumb question. Do you remember when you were like growing up and you'd get like an official ball, or like you'd be playing with the ball and it would be
Mhm.
like, yeah, it'd be some sort of like MLB endorsed baseball. And if it was
Right.
like a National League ball, it would have like the National League president's like signature on it. Do you remember
Mhm.
that?
Mhm.
I
Yep.
assume they
Yep.
don't do that anymore. I assume that's
No.
no longer a thing, right?
No, they're all signed by Rob Manfred. It's just
Ah,
an MLB
yeah.
commissioner ball.
Is
Yeah.
nothing sacred? Is
Yeah. Yeah, because they don't have National League and American League
right,
presidents
right.
anymore.
I'm trying to
So,
remember.
yeah.
Was it Bobby? I'm trying to remember some of the names. The old National League
Yeah.
president, like
Yeah, because you had Bobby, was it Bobby Brown, right? The
Brown.
old
Yeah, yeah,
Yankee.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what
Yeah,
I'm thinking
he
of.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
and then, of course, Bart Giamatti was the National League one before he became commissioner.
Hmm.
Trying to think who else. Bill White. Bill White was the National League
Yes,
one,
of
I think,
course.
right?
Yeah.
So, when we were growing up,
I just always thought
and
that was a nice touch. There's something about that that was just
yeah,
another subtle reminder that these leagues are different. They play
yeah.
differently, and when they play each other, pay attention because that's like worlds colliding, and it definitely no longer feels that way.
No, I remember
It hasn't
reading
for a while.
books. No, I remember reading books about it. I didn't, again, not watching it, you didn't notice it as much, but like the American League called a higher strike because their umpires had the over the chest padding, and so they couldn't see as low. Versus the National League had like the inside the jacket padding, and so they could bend down a little bit lower. That was, at least, I don't know if that was true or not, but that was at least the story that was around. I remember reading about. So yeah, the differences in the leagues were kind of fun, and that's one of the reasons I thought the National League didn't. I mean, a lot of reasons, but that was one of the reasons I didn't think the National League needed a DH. Obviously, that ship has sailed. But yeah, I think that's interesting. At least we're going back. I think as old men, if we're going to complain, we ought to at least give credit where it's due. The All-Star game is going back to actual uniforms this year.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. The one, that's how I grew up watching the All-Star game,
Mhm.
and I have very fond memories of that. But two, they could never make a good looking All-Star uniform.
Mhm.
In my opinion, I don't remember a single one that really stuck out. So I always thought it would have been kind of cool if, and I don't think they ever did this, but whoever was hosting, like let's say the Cardinals, let's say the All-Star game was at Busch, if the American League was kind of in the font of the birds on the bat, but just said American, and same with
Mhm.
the National. But I can see why not, if you're not on the Cardinals, you might not want to be wearing a uniform that looks like a Cardinals uniform, or something like that,
Yeah.
or a Reds uniform if it's in Cincinnati. But I always thought that could have at least given it a little more character and a little more, hey, this is where the All-Star game is this year. But yeah, I probably won't watch it anyway. I kind of more watch the opening pomp and circumstance, and then once the game begins, I kind of the minute they do their first on-field interview while the game is happening is when I know it's time to turn it off.
But then we're not taking it serious anymore. Yeah. I will say I got the when it was in St. Louis in what, 09. I went up there and I got one of the All-Star batting practice jersey type things, and it wasn't too bad because it had the arch over it and had like national written kind of like the Cardinal font. So some of
That's
those
right.
could be interesting. And I think those, and I have no problem with them using those for home run derby and the all the stuff the day before, but just leave it out of the actual game.
Oh, and
Uh,
I still love all of the stuff that surrounds the All-Star game.
mhm.
I really do love the introductions. I love seeing all the players on the field. I think it's cool watching them get their moment. It's just the game no longer just interests me, and that's totally fine. I think that's I, c- it feels as though every All-Star game, well, the only other All-Star game I used to pay attention to was the NBA one, and that one
Mhm.
is way more unwatchable than the baseball All-Star game. So the baseball All-Star game does have that going for it. It still resembles the game they actually play when it's a real game, whereas the NBA one does not, sadly.
Yeah. Fair enough. Do you think that is it just, and I'm with you, and I'm completely with you. I used to record the All-Star game when I was growing up, and now I haven't watched it in a while. Um, but do you think it's partly, hey, we're grumpy old men, but it's partly because again, you can see these players more regularly, and we're seeing them, interleague. It's not special. I mean, it's not like the only time you can see. Well, like for other people, for they could see Ozzie Smith. Ozzie was obviously a big draw at the All-Star game, but now you could see him anytime you wanted to some degree on YouTube or on a games or anything like that. Do you think that the I don't want to say overexposure, but the familiarity of people with other players has kind of made that a little less of a draw?
I suspect that's part of it, but I also suspect you may have answered your own question at the beginning when you identified us as old men, which is that,
Fair.
when I was growing up watching the All-Star game, these guys were like giants to me.
Mhm.
Ozzie Smith, like my gosh. Whereas now the Cardinals stars, I, I'm glad I'm glad they're on my team, but I don't have that reverence for them like I did when I was 9.
Yeah.
For the very obvious reason, I'm just an adult now, and this stuff doesn't quite excite me like it used to. I would be curious to ask a 9-year-old who's really into baseball. I added that caveat of really into baseball because when we were growing up, I would have just said I would be curious to ask a 9-year-old because we all watched baseball.
Right.
That's not really the case anymore. Um, they have so many more options. I think also when I was growing up and when I was really into the All-Star game, we didn't have cable yet either. So,
Mhm.
this. It was like
Mhm.
you watched what was on. And
Right.
when the All-Star game was on, that wasn't just your regular, like, oh gosh, Three's Company's on. Like, this was like a real cool once a year thing. So I'm watching every second of it. Whereas
Mm.
now, um, there are so many more options to steal people's attention. And sometimes I think events like the All-Star game try too hard to steal that attention back with a little
Mm.
too much gimmicky stuff and silly things when I instead of just conceding, hey, it's never going to quite be like it was when we had these ratings back in 1989 or whatever. So
Yeah.
let's just have a fun game. Let's celebrate the game and not to worry too much about all the other stuff. But I think there's a lot of people who get paid a lot of money to worry about that other stuff. So um, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would probably be
Yeah.
my answer, though. I really think that it's just that we've gotten older. I'm sure, like Shohei Otani and Bryce Harper or whoever, the biggest stars in the game today, I would still think there's a subsection of younger kids out there who, when they're on the field, even though they do see them and have a lot more exposure to them than, like, let's say I did with Don Mattingly or Wade Boggs,
Mm-hmm.
still get that kind of excitement of, oh man, like, look at this, is really cool. All the best players who are not on my team, who I don't see every day, are all playing in this game.
Yeah. And I still think and I feel like you're probably with me in that idea that every team needs to have a representative. I know there used to be a lot of complaining about that, but I always felt like that was a good thing. And it was always so much fun to watch those introductions, especially in those years when the Cardinals only had like Ozzie or maybe Ozzie and Ray Langford or something like that. But just to be able to see your players out there on that stage, and maybe that's because St. Louis didn't always get the attention that we thought it should have, but it was always kind of fun to see that.
Yeah, and smart too.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to what I just said about there's people who get paid to come up with this stuff. Like, it certainly makes sense if you want as many fans tuning in to this as possible, that you're going to include every team in Major League Baseball. It would always be kind of funny, like when who's the Marlins rep this year, and then
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
and then seeing who it is. But that's kind of what makes it fun sometimes, is being like, wait, he was an all-star, or I'm trying to think of some of our
Mm-hmm.
funny all-stars over the year. Gosh, who was that relief pitcher who was, I believe, a spring training invitee? He had a funny delivery. Oh man, I can't believe I'm blanking. 2014 was his big season.
Pat Neshek?
Yes, like
Yeah,
Pat
yeah.
Neshek. I love the fact that he made an all-star team. I think that's super cool. And there's a very good chance he knew, like, I'm going to enjoy this because I'm not coming back.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I really enjoy it for those guys as well.
Okay, so we have put our stamp on the fact that we are old men, but we've also said that this team has been an enjoyable team to watch. So, who are you enjoying watching the most out of this team right now?
Well, little secret, this is the first year in a very long time I did not get the MLB package, although I think I'm about to get it. So I have been, in terms of viewing it, so I've been listening to the games, almost every game, and then watching them when they're on TV, or the MLB free game of the day, which is a great feature. I love that, by the way. So I've been listening more than I've been watching, which is different from past years. That said, the guy that I'm kind of paying attention to the most, is that the question?
Yeah.
It's got to be Donovan, right? I mean, he's putting up, I mentioned this last night, but he's putting up close to a 300, 400, 500 season, meaning he's batting like 335. I think he's third in the NL in batting. He's slugging close to 500, even though we would never have quite confused him with a power hitter in years past. And I think he only has hit a home run last night, but I think he only has 4 home runs on the season. And he has a on base of close to 400. I think I just said that backwards, but you know what I mean. He's hitting 335. I just pulled him up. He has an on base of 395, and he's slugging 481. I don't think we've had a player do that since Tommy Pham in 2017, believe it or not. So I'm paying attention to him, and he's just the type of player I've always loved. And I also like the fact that I want to give a shout out to Kyle Reese, who was high on him before I even saw him take a single plate appearance in MLB. And I don't want to misquote Kyle, but if I recall, what he said was, like, this is not a guy who is going to jump out in terms of like the StatCast numbers. But the reason why I like him is if you look at his splits, he doesn't really have any. He figures out how to hit players, whether they're lefties, righties, whether they throw, have a lot of swing and miss stuff, or whether they're junk ballers. He just figures out how to get the bat on the ball. And so he has been a really fun player to watch develop. That said, man, I love Mason Wynn. I absolutely love Mason Wynn. I love that we have this shortstop who is has this crazy arm. Every once in a while does something that, you want to be careful with this, but every once in a while you're like, gosh, that kind of felt like Ozzy.
Yeah, yeah.
But then he's also slugging like 440. And has a WRC plus of 125. And this is our shortstop. I want to be careful here, but like, gosh, if 3 years from now he's like a superstar, I wouldn't be that surprised. I'd be surprised, but it wouldn't catch me totally off guard like the way Donovan's putting up these numbers is right now.
First of all, I do want to appreciate you not directly quoting Kyle, because that's usually not friendly for this show, knowing Kyle. But yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right, though. I cannot think of Brendon Donovan without thinking about it, because I remember Kyle talking about him when he was like in Double-A, and a guy that wasn't on anybody's radar. And I'm like, okay, I mean, we'll see how. I mean, if Kyle's saying it, I trust it, but to then see him come up and to be the player that we, and really not ever have. I mean, he's grown as he's gone, but he's never really struggled too much, right? So it's been pretty incredible. But yeah, I mean, Mason Wynn is always at the top of my list. I have a I don't do baseball cards that often anymore, but I have a stack of Mason Wynn cards right here in front of me as we're talking, because I've been, gone on eBay and bought some and whatever I could do, because I mean, it's not like the Ozzie Smith collection that we have, but give it a few years, who knows?
Well, lastly, I feel like it wouldn't be fair to talk about the Cardinals for almost an hour and not mention Ivan Herrera, who is not one of those 7 players who is qualified for a batting title, as we know, but might have the most thump in his bat on the team. And it's just a reminder that this offense is kind of sneaky deep in a way.
Yeah. So what do you do with Ivan Herrera? I mean, we've seen the Cardinals put him at DH a lot since he came back from his knee injury. He's caught a couple of games. He caught one of the games in Baltimore. So, there's, Pages and Pozo have been, adequate at least behind the plate. You've got a stack of prospects that goes down to like, past A ball, it feels like in the development. Whether any of them will turn out or not, we'll have to wait and see. But still, some are getting close. Where do you put Ivan Herrera?
Well, what's the argument against using him any differently than they are right now? Meaning DHing him and then having him catch a few games every now and then.
Well, I think the only argument I would say is, if you expect him to be a catcher and if you expect him to improve his defensive game, he needs to be behind the plate. Now, and that also, if you're letting him DH, that also locks that spot up when you're talking about Burleson or Gorman or other people that you may want to see. Now, I don't personally have a problem with what they're doing, but I could see, there's a downside to everything, right?
Yeah, well, look, Pages is not an awesome hitter by any stretch. But again, I'm making a big mistake going back to the 2004 well, but remember how lousy Matheny was as a bat on that team? He was very lousy, and it didn't matter because he was surrounded by so many other good hitters. Again, this is not the 2004 lineup, not even close, but they do have, to me, a solid enough offense to cover up like a bat, like, to have a catcher who's more of a defensive catcher and not known for his bat, as we have right now in Pedro Pages. And so, frankly, like, I'm fine having Herrera not quite get that development at catcher, and I'm fine with our catching situation as is. If So I don't know. I I don't know if he's fine with it, but so long as that bat is there, I want to see it in the lineup as often as possible. So
Mhm.
I'm kind of fine with the way they're using him right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
and
is
that
the scuttlebutt on his usage? Is that
I
is
don't know
that
that
yeah
yeah, I don't know that there is per se. I mean, I haven't. I'm sure that the beat writers have written about it, and I just haven't necessarily read the articles. I feel like I said, I think it is just another indication of how this roster gets unwieldy at times because again, we're just now finally seeing a breakout for Alec Burleson. But if Herrera's DHing, then Burleson is probably on the bench because he's not taking over first base for Wilson Contreras very often. And they've put him
yeah
in the outfield a couple of times, but then that's Jordan Walker not playing or, coming in for defensive replacement later on. Um, and so when you've got all these moving parts and people that you want to see, it becomes a little bit difficult. But I think that it makes a lot of sense for, if you're concerned about, and I think part of the reason that they've not had him behind the plate as much as, when you get into teams that can run, you want Pages behind the plate if possible. Um, and there's, especially when we get through the Central, it seems to be everybody can run. So we may see a lot of it that way. So I don't know. I think they're still trying to figure it out. I'm sure they don't want to run the risk of injury again because they do need that bat. And I just think it's going to be kind of interesting to see how often he catches over the next few weeks.
yeah I like pies behind the plate. I like a team like this having their best defense on the field as often as possible. A team that allows a lot of
Mhm.
balls in play. Um, I've the catcher's a little bit different in that dynamic than let's say like your up the middle defense, I guess, but y- you know what I mean. I've always
Yeah.
enjoyed having, I think it's very important to have a very good defensive stopper back there. I think just because I have, you know, I worshipped at the altar of Yadier Molina for all those years, and I that's what that's kind of
Yeah.
that's kind of what we all were raised on the last 20 years. So I like Pages back there. I really do.
Yeah, I think that, and I mean, it is, and again for us, coming up in the '80s when defense was the thing for the Cardinals, and it has been pretty much the thorough line from the '80s till now. Is the Cardinals have had a good defense, and that's what you want, whether at every position, if at all possible. And um, so yeah, I think that's another reason that they've kind of leaned into that way. It's going to be interesting not only to see if that is what they do this year, but how, if there's not a time in the future in a couple of years where that's a permanent type of thing, depending on how these other catchers develop, I guess. So
Can I ask you a quick question?
absolutely.
Who leads this team in home runs, and how many do they hit? Is this going to be like a
At the
Tom
end of the season,
Bernanski, where like the he leads the team in home runs with like 20?
if Contreras stays healthy, I mean, you probably lean toward him in 20, 20 to 25. Yeah, I mean, because what last year, Goldschmidt led with 22, and Burleson was at 21, and Burleson didn't hit one for 6 weeks. And I don't think this team is much different. So unless for some reason Nolan Gorman got on track and just got lights out because he could hit them in bunches, I think you're probably looking at a Contreras at 20 to 22 as probably the leader on this team. Um, and like I said, Jordan Walker has looked better over the last little bit, but I can't imagine that he's going to get to a
Yeah.
spot where he's just in a couple of years maybe. But I mean, if he has 12 to 15 this year, I think we're happy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I could see maybe Herrera like hitting 23 home runs and
Mm-hmm.
like 375 plate appearances or something like that. Kind of like I almost said like a Craig Paquette type season, but I don't know if did Craig Paquette ever hit that many home runs? Probably not.
Don't
Let's
know.
look. Yeah, I used to remember some guys on when I'd come on, so I'm going to off the cuff remember Craig Paquette
Well,
real
I
quick.
mean, yeah,
And-
I wonder it'd also be like McGuire 97, right? Where he hit, I don't remember how many, he hit 20 something when he came over after the trade in limited number of bats.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He hit 24 home runs in basically a month and a half. It felt
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
because if you remember, he started off really slow those first like 5 or 6 games. He wasn't hitting anything, and then he went on that tear. I just looked up Craig Paquette. He hit 15 home runs in both 2000 and 2001. In 2000, he had 420 plate appearances, and in 2001, he had 370. So it wasn't the worst comparison I've ever made.
No, I think that's. I mean, yeah, that season of 2001 was like his best season as a Cardinal. So I would hope that if Ivan Herrera did it, wouldn't be his best season as a Cardinal. But we will see what we will see. All right. Well, Alex, it's been fun. I look forward. I know you're going to be at Vlogger Day next week as we get into St. Louis. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Do you have a question for Mo worked up, or are you just going to kind of read the room?
Well, I'm not even going to be in the room because I am not going to get to St. Louis. I'm taking a train from Springfield, Illinois, and it is going to arrive in downtown St. Louis at noon. So I'm going to have to hurry over to the ballpark. So I'm going to miss the Q&A, but I will be at the game, and I'm very much looking forward to it and to see all of you guys.
Well, we might be able to drag him out if you hurry.
I'm sure he's
able to get him.
I'm sure he's
he usually goes 45 minutes to an hour. So
okay. Well, I'll try to get there as fast as I can. Then maybe I'll just go straight to the ballpark with all my bags and not go to the hotel first. Or maybe I'll have Kyle ask a question for me. But
I get Kyle. That's what I do.
Everyone else there will have better questions than I will, so we're probably better off.
No, I usually Mo always likes to make some comments about mine, so I've left him alone the last couple of years. So we'll see if we can. It's our last opportunity with him. We'll have to come up with some good ones. But
well, since it is the last one, and I don't know if other teams do this, but I do want to give credit. I think it's cool that they do this event and that they actually give real FaceTime in terms of sitting down for like a Q&A with all these angry bloggers. I don't know if every team does that. It wouldn't shock me if they don't.
No, in fact, it was interesting. I'm on this MLB fan council that's just kind of getting started, and was talking with some other fans from other teams and talking about this. And yeah, there was nothing like that in anybody else had anything like that. In fact, a lot of teams, they do have some things for the fans here and there. I think the Tigers have like a fan of the year type of thing and stuff like that, but nobody seems to have that kind of access as of what I've heard. There may be, like I said, there may be some other things, but not too much. So
gotcha.
All right. Well, again, Allen is back with us next week. We will probably record earlier in the week so that we can get to, I can get to St. Louis. I don't think Allen's going to join us this time around, but look forward to that. It's been great having Alex on. And then for Alex, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Now Roland with a chance to give the Cardinals a lead for the first time tonight, which he does. Is it gone? Yes! Down the left field line by Roland. His third home run in this LCS.
Hi, everyone. Rich Bray here with a look back at Yadier Molina's Major League debut that took place 21 years ago next week. On June 3rd, 2004, Molina made history when he debuted in a 5-3 Cardinals win over the Pirates. With his brothers Benji and Jose both playing for the Angels, Yadier's call-up marked the first time in baseball history that three brothers were catching for big league clubs at the same time. The day prior, Cardinals starting catcher Mike Matheny was removed in the fourth inning due to a muscle strain in his right side. Matheny, a Gold Glover who was well known for his toughness, had been battling the injury for a week, but aggravated it in his first at-bat and had to admit that the injury was making it hard for him to breathe. With the potential for Matheny to be out for an extended period of time, the Cardinals called upon Molina, who was batting .310 with 1 homer and 14 RBIs in 36 games with AAA Memphis. Manager Tony La Russa wasted no time in getting Molina into the starting lineup, pairing him with 37-year-old veteran Woody Williams. Together, the pair enjoyed a scoreless first inning. In the second, Molina took his first big league at-bat, popping up to Pirates second baseman Abraham Nunez. In the bottom half of the second, Molina returned the favor. With 2 outs, Nunez singled, then looked to score on a single by Oliver Perez. The throw from Cardinals right fielder Reggie Sanders came into the plate ahead of Nunez, and Molina made a diving tag to end the inning. He's got so much composure, La Russa said. He plays like he's got 10 years of experience. In the top of the fifth, Molina collected the first hit of his career on a line drive into the left field gap. 2 innings later, he led off the seventh with a double down the left field line, scoring on a sacrifice fly by Woody Williams. The Cardinals led 4-0 in the 8th inning when Pirates shortstop Jack Wilson led off with an infield single. 3 pitches later, he attempted to steal second and became the first of the 381 base runners Molina caught stealing over his 19-year career. He did a good job, Woody Williams said after the game. It's a special day for him, and I'm sure it's something he never forgets. So that's the story of how Yadier Molina got 2 hits and threw out his first base runner in his MLB debut. For more Cardinals history, visit stlredbirds.com or follow me on Twitter at Remembirds, REMEMBIRDS.
He hits it in the air to left field. Back is Chavez. At the wall, this ball is gone. 2-run home run, Yadier Molina. And St. Louis takes a 3-1 9th inning Game 7 lead.